Good morning, everybody. We're working on a few audio issues here, but I think we're going to try to get this October 17th MDC committee meeting started at 10:04 now. Before we begin, we'd like to welcome our new public member, Kathy Bowler, and welcome back new veterinarian member, Dr. Waterhouse, and Christy Pulaski, RVP, as our new board member, RVP. Excited to have all of you guys on the committee. And also would like to announce that Dr. Bradbury is going to be stepping down from her role as our board member veterinarian. And we really want to thank her for all of her hard work and expertise she's devoted to our committee over the past few years. And this will be Dr. Bradbury's last meeting on the committee. And she has appointed Dr. Grant to be our new veterinarian board member. And he will begin as a member of this committee after today's meeting. Thank you. Dr. Sullivan? Present. Mr. Bell? Present. Ms. Bowler? Present. Dr. Bradbury? Present. Dr. Lazarchuk? Dr. Lazarchuk, you're muted.
Present. Here.
Ms. Borowski? Present. Dr. Sequoia?
Present.
Ms. Esri? Present. Dr. Whitehouse? Present. Yes, sir. Thank you. Is there any members of the public who would like to make any comments on items not on the agenda? So standing here in the room, moderator will be open this item for online comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am opening up the question and answer panel. Members of the public that would like to make a comment, you may type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, I see no request for comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And with that, we will move on to.
Sorry, I just wanted to say one thing before the meeting, which is happy Vet Tech Week, and thank you to our RVP for serving here and to all of your other incredible tasks that you do. And so I just wanted to honor the veterinary technicians.
And we will be moving on to agenda item number 4, which is consideration of Oh, I'm sorry. Skipping ahead too far. Sorry. Item number 3 is review and approval of our April 18th, 2023 meeting minutes. Have any comments from anyone on the committee?
Approval. I'll second.
We have I think we can see if there's any public comment on this item before a vote. So standing here in the room, moderator, can we open this online, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 3, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no request for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Mr. Bell? Yes. Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Abstain.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Dr. Lazarchuk?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Pulaski?
Abstain.
Dr. Sequoia?
Yes.
Ms. Esri?
Yes.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Abstain.
Motion carries. We can now move on to agenda item number 4, which is our consideration of previously approved text for CCR Title 16, Sections 2030.6 and 2035.5 regarding shelter minimum standards and update discussion and potential recommendation for proposed text for CCR Title 16, 2030.4 regarding minimum standards for shelter premises and minimum standards for alternative veterinary premises with Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Salacito for help putting together a list of stakeholders to address this topic. And also to thank the many stakeholders that attended that September 11th meeting to hopefully put this to bed literally. So that group included the California Animal Welfare Association, CDMA, members from Davis and management personnel from different individual shelters. So we had a really good cross-section of people to participate. I found it very difficult to summarize this memorandum for today because there has been a lot of history here, and maybe, just maybe, we are getting to a consensus on this. But then we thought that in the past too, right, Dr. Miller? Prior to 2015, yeah. The board recognized two major problems with shelter medicine. First, there was different sizes and services that shelters provided both to their community and to the public. And there was challenges that shelters were facing in getting veterinarians and veterinary staff to provide those services. From 2015 to 2019, the board held 15 public meetings to discuss these issues with stakeholders participating. In 2019, the board approved a rulemaking proposal to adopt a new section, 2030.6, as a minimum standard for shelter medicine. In addition, the proposal added sections 2035.5, specifying what animal health care tasks registered veterinary technicians, veterinary assistants, and veterinary assistant controlled substance permit holders could do under written protocols of a veterinarian. Shortly after the proposal was approved, the shelter community raised concerns regarding the inability of some shelters to comply with Section 2035.5, particularly in small rural communities. As such, Assembly Bill 1535 created an exemption in the Veterinary Practice Act for individuals providing specified care to animals impounded by a shelter not registered with the board. In January 2022, the Sports Registrations Council raised significant concerns with the rulemaking package regarding the minimum standards for alternate premises. That was Section 2030 and beyond. Because of the duplicative language throughout this section of the Act, the board directed the MUC to restructure the minimum alternative veterinary premises and shelter rulemaking proposals to remove duplicative language and address concerns raised by the board's regulations council. The MUC worked with the board's regulations council and stakeholders to restructure sections 2030 through 2030.3, which is attachment 2. The proposed rulemaking would make all veterinary premises subject to the new general minimum standards for veterinary premises. However, for each alternate veterinary premises, the proposed language included exemptions appropriate for that type of premises minimum standards in Section 2030. The board approved that proposal during its April 2023 meeting. Since the board meeting, the MDC Vice Chair, Board Vice President, Regulations Council, Executive Officer, and board staff worked together to restructure the shelter premises proposal to mirror those minimum standards that were already approved. During that time, Regulations Council raised concerns about the text proposed in Section 2035.5 involving clarity of the phrase, and I quote, limited medical care, unquote, and involving lack of authority for the board to essentially authorize delegation of discretion to the shelter premises to determine what, quote, limited medical care, unquote, could be provided to animals by an RVT, a veterinary assistant, controlled substance permit holder, functioning under a veterinarian's protocol and procedures. It was determined that this piece of shelter proposal would need to be removed. On September 11th, 2023, the MDC Vice Chair and the Board Vice President held a stakeholder meeting with various members of the shelter community, including Cal Animal and CVMA. During the meeting, the stakeholders provided feedback, and the regulatory proposal was amended accordingly. The MDC Vice Chair also requested the Regulations Council research legal meeting at impound for the purpose of possibly further defining it in the proposal. Regulations Council advised that she could find no legal definition for impound as related to animal law or regulation in California. So it appeared by using the definition, the common dictionary definition, that when using it, this word, California law, presumes the ordinary meaning of the term. As a result, the Regulations Council does not recommend adding a definition for impound to the proposal. At this time, I will stop and see if the committee has any comments or staff as to the background of what we're proposing today. Any public comment?
I do want to really just thank the work for the subcommittee and all of the stakeholders who came together at the stakeholder meeting. It was really beneficial to hear all of the perspectives and work groups and concerns that they had. I think before that was necessarily done, so I really want to thank them all.
Sure, thank you. Any public comments? Could the moderator please ask for public comments on the website?
Thank you so much. This is the moderator, and I am opening up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 4, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment.
And to clarify, this is only public comment on the background section of this. We don't have a motion yet or talking about the specific liquid.
All right, this is the moderator, and at this time I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Okay. So the actual proposed language is relatively short, but there's quite a bit of background to getting to there. So I'm going to go through a couple of sections and open it up for comment, and we'll kind of get through it in that manner. Section A is actually a definition of animal shelter premises. It's being proposed to define it as a building or portion thereof where veterinary services are being provided to animals, impounded by a privately or publicly operated agency or organization, and does not meet the exception criteria pursuant to paragraph 5, subsection A of section 4827 of the code. That's the section that exempts all shelters that are not registered. Rationale, the definition includes all shelters, premises that provide veterinary services impounded animals. It also recognizes for the purpose of inspection, the premises may be part of the building, because the shelter also has a responsibility of impounding and boarding animals which are part of the hospital portion of the building, which are not part of the hospital part of the building. It also includes privately and publicly operated agencies to provide notice to the regulated community regarding who would be expected to comply with these regulations. And then it excludes the smaller shelters. Subsection B, this section would be added to specify that unless otherwise provided in sections, in this section or section 2030.3, animal shelter premises are providing veterinary services to privately owned animals that are not otherwise impounded. The rationale of adoption of this standard is necessary to ensure that the minimum standards for a shelter that is providing veterinary services to the public must comply to Section 2030, provide consumer protection at the same level as a non-shelter practice. So I'll read that, open that up, and for any comments or questions from the committee. Basically, we're saying that if a shelter is providing veterinary services to the public, it operates at the same standard as any other veterinary facility in the state. And I'll open up for any comments from the public in the room related to section A and B, subsection A and B. Seeing none, moderator, would you open up to the public online, please?
Thank you so much. I'm opening up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public has comments on subsections A and B, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen or simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Subsection C, this section would establish that an animal shelter providing veterinary services solely to impounded animals shall meet all of the standards in section 2030 except paragraph 3A, which has to do with reception room and reception room and office, or the combination of the two. For 4A is an examination room separate from other areas of the premises and not sufficient and of sufficient size to accommodate a doctor, assistant, and patient and client. And section 5C, requirement to post signs for public when there are no personnel during any time that the animals are left in the veterinary premises. The rationale is if a shelter is providing veterinary services to only impounded animals, animal patient, there is not a need to have a separate reception room and office or a combination of the two, since they are not receiving privately owned animal patients or the public. This means that that there is not a client for these types of animals. As a result, a large separation room to provide confidential client consultation is not needed. Since the requirement for posting a sign is intended to provide consumers with privately owned animals with the status information, and there's no client involved, this requirement was not necessary. Subsection D, this proposal would require animal shelter premises providing only post-adoption services to provide animals adopted from the same premises within 30 days of adoption to comply with the requirements of impounded animals in subsection C. In other words, this section says that even though they are seeing animals after the this case, a pounded animal has been seen, what might be to take stitches out or to check their health status within the first 30 days. They did not have to comply with the higher standard. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the public? Staying none in the room, we'll open it up. Moderator, could you open up for any questions online?
Thank you so much. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. Again, we're displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I will also add a note that during this time, fairly recently, it came to our attention that these changes conflict with building code regulations, which is handled in another agency. So we are in communication with them.
I'm sorry, Dr. Sullivan is currently not on the agenda, so we're not prepared to discuss that.
All right, that's.
So he's just making clarification. So in the motion requested, they're going to ask for it to be combined with the alternate premises rulemaking, and the alternate premises one is currently on hold. So it's just saying that it's currently on hold because of the building containers, but we still want a motion to combine the shelter regulations with the alternate premises.
Thank you for that clarification. So, then I think if there's no other, I guess.
I was just going to ask if you wanted.
Yes, please.
Wait, I couldn't hear what you said, Kathy.
I said I was just going to ask if you'd like a motion before.
Yeah, it's pretty loud over here. I'm sorry. I just wanted to go back to what Dr. Sullivan was trying to say about it was cut off, and I felt like that is agendized because we are talking about the same thing, and it's just a clarification, and I don't feel like that was clear. So I want him to finish his sentence.
I think Jessica clarified it.
Okay.
That we're moving this forward to the material that already was passed in April. We're combining that, which is going to be on hold at the present time. Okay. I did a motion.
I'll be happy to make it. I just want to confirm from Jessica, is there anything I need to add to this motion in regard to whatever we got interrupted? I just want to make sure.
No, in the motion and on the agenda, it does say that we are looking at consideration of combining the shelter regs with the alternate premises reg. So Dr. Sullivan was just noting that while you're combining it, it's currently on hold. So that was all we were going to discuss.
So the motion as written is fine.
Right.
Okay. All right, I have to read it. The motion is to recommend to the board approval of the proposed regulatory text, recommend all of the following actions to be taken. I still may need to read them all, right? Eric? Rescind the prior 2019 motion approving proposed CCR sections 2030.6 and 2035.5 and approve the proposed regulatory text in attachment 3. Direct staff to submit the text in attachments 2 and 3 as one proposal to the Director of DCA, Department of Consumer Affairs, and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for a hearing if requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulations as noticed for California Code of Regulations Title 16, Sections 2030, 2030.05, 2030.1, 2030.15, 2030.2, and 2030.3, and 2030.4.
Second?
Any discussion from the committee? Yes. Christine?
I don't mind being called Jessica. I aspire to be. I just wanted to say thank you. It's obviously a lot of work and going back to doing this again. I wanted to thank our regulatory counsel for helping as well, and Dr. Solicito, that she's not here, and all the stakeholders. I appreciate all the work you're doing. I do say thank you as well. I think I was back there in 1990.
And I'll add to that, just as being on the board for all these years, we've talked about this for many, many years, as we all can recall. And I really think that it's taken a long time, but all the discussion and all the stakeholder input has gotten us to a good place. I know we're still not over the threshold yet, but thank you, Dr. Sullivan, and all the rest of the stakeholders who've been working so hard on this. I believe we will get it soon.
Yeah, the only other comment is, I have been to all of those meetings, and Dr. Miller will agree that the atmosphere at this last meeting was very cooperative and genial, and everyone was there with, I think, the same purpose in getting this finished. It was a totally different environment. Thank all the participants also. Any comment from the public? Seeing none in room, moderator, could you open up for comment online?
Thank you so much. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second.
Ms. Chevelle?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Dr. Lacerda?
Yes, and nice work.
Ms. Wojcicki?
Yes.
Dr. Sequoia?
Yes.
Ms. Efrain?
Yes.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you all very, very much for all of your hard work on that over the last 100 years or so. Let's take us to agenda item number 5, update, discussion, and potential recommendations to initiate rulemaking for CCR Title 16, 2032.3 regarding medical records, and the subcommittee for that is Dr. Sullivan and Maureen.
Okay, so we've had many discussions over the last year involving the record-keeping department. We've had fantastic input from our stakeholders on that, so thank you for all your help in getting them together. Stakeholders felt that the language in CCR section 2032.3 was geared more towards small animal medicine, where cases involved only individual patients, whereas in equine and production animal medicine, the medical approach is often more of a herd health approach, treating multiple animals at the same time at the same location and the same diagnosis and treatment. So it's also determined that our medical record section was too prescriptive. CDMA recommended that the medical records should be in more of a logical order such that the veterinarian could follow with the SOAP format, which is the majority of veterinarians. They also provided us with medical record examples from all 50 states subcommittee then chose 12 states as representative examples and looked in depth at each of those, as well as looked at record-keeping requirements from 3 human healing arts disciplines. The subcommittee identified 3 issues that it needed to consider. 1, the logical order of the required information that makes up a medical record should be changed to follow the format for of writing medical records. 2, record-keeping requirements must consider both A, an individual medical record for diagnosing and treating an individual animal, whether it's a companion animal, equine patient, or production animal, and B, a group medical record where several animals can be treated for the same condition at the same location at the same time, whether they're cattle, horses, sheep, dogs, cats, etc. 3, requirements should be less restrictive. After compiling a rough draft, the subcommittee, along with EBMA, board staff, and the Regulations Council, had several meetings and communications regarding this proposal. Beginning in June of this year, to wordsmith the document to its present form. Subcommittee recommendations. OAL reviews all regulatory proposals to ensure that an agency regulation meets the standards set by law in the Administrative Procedure Act. So these include whether the regulation meets the following standards: are they necessary, authority, clarity, consistency, reference, and non-duplication. With the foregoing requirements in mind, the subcommittee recommends proposal in attachment 1 of the meeting materials and provides the following explanations for these changes. We're proposing to reformat this section so that we can clearly define 2 different standards for types of medical records, as well as list the minimum requirements for each type of medical record in a more logical order according to the SOAP format. This is going to require renumbering existing subsections and rearranging items. So I'll go through this on a higher level, and if anybody has any in-depth questions, just let them know. Subsection A, the subcommittee recommends revising this subsection to add the term medical record to explain more clearly what records this section covers. The existing language in the section states the record shall contain the following information and provides a laundry list of categories that have to be covered. To address concerns about the prescriptive nature of current regulations, we're striking the word following and adding language to denote that these standards are at a minimum the content standards for medical records. This subsection will also add language specifying that records shall be kept according to the new requirements set forth in paragraphs 1 and 2 of subsection B, relating to single patient medical record requirements and group medical record requirements. Subsection B is a new section that introduces the concept of requiring 2 types of medical records, one for a single animal patient care and one for the care of group patients, depending on veterinary services requested by the client or their authorized agent. To implement these new medical records using categories, the subcommittee proposes adding language to this subsection to require medical records to be generated as applicable and according to whether the veterinary services are being provided to a single animal patient. Subsection B1 is a new section that provides a new heading entitled Single Patient Medical Records and includes an introductory phase that receives a list of items to specify what the minimum content for a single animal patient would consist of. So this is going to be the newly added and renumbered items B1, A through N. Anybody want me to go through those one by one, or is that something that we're doing?
I would like to, that'd be great. Yeah,
So D1A relates to the existing regulation that sets a requirement for dates, beginning and ending of the custody of the animals. There's no change here except for renumbering. D1B is a new statement and requests the names of the individuals that are providing patient care to be recorded in the medical record. D1C relates to existing regulation and sets a requirement for name, address, and phone number of the client. We will also repeal existing A3, which is the name or identity of the animal heard with block. Section E1D is consistent with the aforementioned policy objectives. This section revises the old subsection A4, makes it more specific to requirements more commonly found in a single animal patient medical record by adding references to patient identifying information, including names, to the existing requirements proposed to be retained. It also removes reference to herd or flock for the reasons mentioned previously.
As I was reading through this about the 100th time, this would also involve large animals that are undergoing individual treatment or surgery. So I think that in addition to this identification, we should probably have possibly the number, and also the animal number.
The animal number if applicable.
Sorry.
Animal number if applicable.
So where would you like that? Would you like it after and color and then say and animal number if applicable after that?
For stopping, can I ask a couple of questions here? So when we, and this is merely a question, when we talk about beginning and ending of ownership or of like the dates, beginning and ending of custody of the animal, why do we do ending? Why do we do that?
Well, because, well, our thinking was if it was a hospitalized animal, the requirement is a physical exam when they come in, progress reports daily. So if there's no notation as to what the last day is, that it was there, and I'm not sure it's enforceable.
Yeah, I guess I'm reading this differently, but I can understand that. It's, I can understand that. I guess when I'm reading this, I'll come back to that. Name, address, and phone number of the client. I know that this is existing language, and I will say that I've had on numerous occasions where clients refuse to give this information where they don't have it. So, and I know that this is something that, like I said, is existing, but clients may not have this information. So I don't know that if there's other terminology that we can use that we can be more I want to be just aware that not all clients have this information to give. So we need to be socially aware. I don't know if there's other terminology that we can use.
You know, we were thinking the other direction. If there's an emergency comes up,
Yeah.
you don't have a phone number, and you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So, as with anything in the medical records that the client refuses or can't do, I believe it's incumbent on you saying not applicable or not
Right.
obtained or something that the other says.
Yeah, I just think, my concern is making it in a part of the medical record. I think that's just my concern. So, so far, what you covered.
Well, I think she's covered it, but I think the issue is that for authorization, also for authorization to any kind of care after, would need some contact information. So I don't know if there would be a way to possibly add something like other contact information regulations, but I can't. What do you do in this situation? Is there another way to contact that individual to get some sort of consent to additional care?
We've had that situation, yeah, we've had it, and we work with people. They give us relatives' phone numbers, and they give us relatives' information, but sometimes they don't tell you that's what they've done. So it's just, I'm just saying, it's not always possible.
Well, that is the client's information.
Yeah.
Right, so,
I think that does comply with the regulation.
yeah, I think it's just being aware. I don't know if there's an answer to it.
Yeah, I think in the situation you provided, if they have to price something, and it might not be their direct phone number, but it's a phone number of the client and contact them. So I think because of the current law, we haven't had an issue with this, I think we can keep it. And you would just do the same thing if they well, I don't have a phone number, use the phone number of my mom. Okay.
And the name of the individuals providing patient care, or is every technician and assistant and doctor need to be documented? And that's sort of how I read that there. Like anybody who touches the animal or any. Great question.
Section D1E is reworded.
Sorry, just for clarification, before we move on, because there was a request to add to D, and so it was suggest if you don't mind typing it in after and color. And it would be and animal number if applicable, or you could do if applicable animal number. Make it, that's the only thing that you have the option of the animal number. So if you do and color and if applicable animal number.
Section D1E is reworded to add new content requirements to include the reason the patient is presenting for veterinary services and a history relative to the reason for the visit. 1F would be revised to add new requirements for documenting physical exam findings, laboratory testing, diagnostic imaging, and necropsy. B1G is a new subsection that would add the requirements of including interpretation of examination findings and any information obtained by instrumentation, laboratory testing, diagnostic imaging, and necropsy. This would essentially ask for the interpretation of the findings in D1F and is the assessment portion of the subsystem. Anybody have any questions on those two? I want to open it up for public comment real quick before we move on. Does anybody in the room have any questions?
Dr. Chris,
Good morning.
sorry, I really appreciate you trying to provide feedback because you're a board member and not an NBC member yet. We'd ask you to provide the feedback during the board meeting tomorrow.
No problem.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Lutz, and I have a couple of comments. On B1A, and for those of you who don't know me, I don't know how many of you don't know me, but I review a fair number of medical records for my clients. So in B1A, I always have trouble with the custody issue because when a patient comes in just for one day, a couple of times I've been asked, you know, what the dates of the custody, where the date is clearly on the medical record of when the services were provided. So, I mean, I just have a little problem with that custody term. I understand what you're getting at, Dr. Sullivan, is that we want to know the last day the patient was there, but usually in a record, it's pretty clear the last day the patient was there because there should be dates of every day the patient was there. So, I mean, again, the term custody is a little weird because you really, I don't really think you're taking the patient into your custody just because they come in for vaccines or something like that. So I've just always had a problem with the word custody. If there's some other way to indicate, obviously the date's important. Okay, section B1B. Oh, and I guess that question was answered. I had the same question that you had, Dr. Bradbury, is every single person who puts their hands on that pet supposed to be in the medical record? That seems a little excessive to me. And I understand having because a lot of the records now are computerized, and it's pretty easy to see who put their hands on the pet, but there isn't every single solitary person. So is that the intent of this, to have every single person who did anything to the pet be listed, or just we always looked at it as providing care, meaning veterinarians, RVTs, you know, VACSPs that did inoculations. That's the way we looked at providing care.
Intent, I think, is if there's a procedure being done or a treatment being done, that whoever did that have their name or initials. When I see the medical records that I reviewed today, the computerized ones, that's usually they're logged in as technician X did this item, the fluids or whatever. So when you're documenting what it was done, their initials are there.
Right, and I understand that, but what I'm saying is it supposed to be every single person who put their hands on the pet, or just the people that provided a service? Because providing care is sort of vague and really isn't clear. And I understand what you're saying, Dr. Sullivan, but I think we need more clarification there just so there isn't confusion.
All right, before we have a discussion, this is just for public comment, so it's not a back and forth discussion. So if we can have public comment and a discussion afterwards.
Okay, my next public comment. Okay. My next comment is B1D. I think I raised this issue before. I don't understand the reason for putting the breed in there. There's a large interest in getting away from purebred dogs and identifying the breed of a dog. So it seems a little
15
excessive that
seconds.
that's something that's required in a medical record. And also the age. I'm dealing with a case right now where we have a series of animals that were from an animal shelter, and we're being questioned about why the age isn't listed, and you know, we don't know the age when we're dealing with a large number of animals from a rescue or an animal shelter. So I understand that it's important to put the age, but maybe we could somehow describe that so that it's just it's known, because in a lot of cases, if we get animals that are coming in from a rescue or a shelter, we don't know the age.
3 minutes are
That's
up.
all I had. Thank you.
Grant Miller, CBMA. Regarding the Ms. Pulowski's comments about the client's contact information, I have the same problem in practice. It's very difficult to sometimes get an address from somebody. And we had thought about just changing it to contact information, but that's vague, and this is existing law, so we decided that it would be easier to leave it this way. The other thing I'd like to point out, with the passage of AB 1399, telemedicine may only be provided on animals that reside in the state. So the medical record is going to need to have a physical address to verify that the animals are indeed located here, unless there's some other requirement of the veterinarian through regulations to declare or to find out from the client where the animal is located. So the address would most likely be the way that would be done, as far as I know. And then a question or a comment regarding 4D. Instead of saying animal number, could you just say identification number? Thank you.
Moderator, can we open it up for public comment online?
Thank you so much. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want to have a discussion?
I did. I think I'd like to hear Christine's comments about it first, about the individuals you were which it is about, you had your hand up at the same time, 1B, need name of the individuals providing care.
Okay, so with regard to the comments on custody and patient care and ambiguity, I don't think it's ambiguous. We're using the term commonly understood. Whenever a term is not defined in regulation, you need how it's commonly understood. So custody includes the dictionary definition of keeping and care. So I think that's what we're talking about. We're not actually talking. You know, it can be short-term, it can be long-term care, but that is something, my understanding, that is commonly recorded in medical records, because you're talking about whether, you know, how the animal was cared for, you're documenting in the medical record when that began and ended. So I think that's the explanation for that, the use of that term. That's been in regulation for a while. I don't know, Jen, comment as to whether there's been an issue with enforcing that term. As far as patient care, again, we're talking about prevention, treatment, and management of illness treatment options. That's what, as Dr. Tolman indicated, patient care. So individuals providing patient care are the ones that are documented. So everyone that's doing that at the veterinary premises would be reporting to the proposal.
So my concern with this is it's not I don't think it's a difficult thing if it's like a general practice and an animal's coming in for a small animal and there's one technician or assistant that's helping. It's in a larger 24-hour facility where you have assistants that are taking the animal out and for a walk, and there's so many people that are involved, and I guess they are documenting that, so maybe it isn't as big of a thing, it just is an awful lot of individuals putting their hands, you know, but if it's just for their main administration of medication, procedures, yeah, so I think it'll be perhaps difficult for people to interpret, the layperson, but if that's the intention, then I think it's really beautiful.
So, for instance, if I have an assistant that moves the dog from one cage to another, cage, I wouldn't think that would be in care, but I don't think it rises to the level of that. And I don't think that's how it was intended.
But if they were cleaning out the cage because it soiled the cage, then they would have to document that. They would be documenting that anyway. So I think
Yeah, that's
I also just wonder about the large animal setting. I don't have any experience there in people taking care of. This is for just single patient.
Good question. At first, you know, in reading this, I thought it all sounded perfect until we started talking about the devils and the details. I had, on the, maybe the care word could be changed to treatment or something, but I understand that that's really what the intent is if there's treatment involved, not eating or necessarily that could be treatment too, but not moving or whatever, it's more about treatment, and I assume that is all documented and corrected, hopefully. One thing I thought I would, during one of the public comments on the age, maybe we could just say if known. Gender is also an issue when exotics are concerned. I just realized, I was thinking, you know, some parents' toleration determines that, and that's obvious, but in others, it is more of an invasive testing for gender. So I don't know how that's different now. I know this is what's in there now, and obviously they just go by what the client is saying, I suppose, but I don't even know the genders actually in my parents. Just, I mean, but if known.
This is just in response to the comment about breed. While I understand the intent of Ms. Lee's comment. I would just say as an internist anyway, and I think as a general practitioner too, breed is, if it's known, it's very helpful when assessing a patient. There's breed-specific genital disorders, and then also just to understand kind of this one consulting with me, I understand the size of the patient. A lot of things do actually come into play with breed, and I think it's the same for different large animal species as well. So different folks do different things, and they have different issues, sizes, et cetera. So I think I would say that if possible, it should be kept in there.
Just to so there's been a couple members now that have suggested do age if known. I think age also comes into play quite a bit in enforcement cases. And so rather than if known, perhaps look at doing approximate age, because I feel like veterinarians can at least do an approximate of how old the animal is, and that's really, really crucial for the treatment being provided. So if you do if known, that leaves the option to leave it blank. And I don't want it to be blank for enforcement, so I prefer approximate age.
I like that.
I've got an idea on 2032.3, subsection B1, is employed, the issue regarding providing patient care, everyone who's doing that. Perhaps right now, 2036 defines the animal health care task, or we could refer to veterinary medical services. That way it's a bit more clear what tasks are being provided. It's not sweeping the floor or providing a pillow for the comfort of the animal. It's actual veterinary care. So thinking of maybe striking providing patient care would come out. Maybe insert veterinary medical services to the animal patient.
Did you just say patient veterinary medical services instead of veterinary services to the patient?
I said veterinary medical services to the animal patient.
Right, but it doesn't say to the animal patient. Can you just say patient, animal patient, veterinary medical services, or something to that effect?
I guess I've been trying to maintain consistency with the term. So anytime I see patient, I always insert animal patient. It's more of a term consistency issue rather than, we already know that veterinary refers to an animal. But, I think maybe that issue could be a minor technical change as you guys move through that process. But at the very least, maybe we could figure out the patient care problem.
And just can you scroll down to D, did you add approximate age? Okay, thank you.
Next is subsection B1H. This proposal would revise existing subsection A10 to require inclusion of a presumptive diagnosis or diagnosis if made. Section B1I would be moved and renumbered from current subsections A8 and A12 and revised to strike the reference to an intended treatment plan. That's redundant since all plans include intention, and would include any of the following lists that was received, the list in subparagraph B, I 1 through 3. B I 1 through 3 is subparagraph would be added to include new requirements for recording treatments, including application of therapies or devices administered and prescribed. For medications administered, including strength, to existing requirements for recording all medications prescribed and dispensed. B1J would restate the old section A11 requirement of recording any prognosis of the animal condition, but would remove the phrase if relevant and replace it with if made. B1K would add new reporting requirements for animals that are housed or retained for treatment, including the beginning and ending dates of custody of the animal patient and daily update on the animal patient's medical condition relative to the treatment plan, and would remove the words progress if relevant and disposition of case from existing regulations, which is currently A13. B1L is the renumbering of the existing subsection A9. There's also some grammatical changes, like deleting the word sedative and adding a requirement to document any pre-anesthetic medication and add the word dosage. B1M is new and requires an entry of any veterinary services or recommendations declined by the client or their authorized representative. B1N will retain and renumber existing requirements for name or initials of the person responsible. Anybody have any questions on them? I'm sorry. Is there a reason we don't use the terminology concentration instead of strength? A more accurate term. I mean, you did throughout all our language, and I just think that now would be the time to start changing it because it's inappropriate. Is it because of pharmacy law? Yeah, I don't know, and that's what I don't. I figured that Dr. Sullivan would be the one who knows this.
All I know is if we change something or add something, we have to give a good explanation. So we can brush out one word, we have to explain why we've done it. Since this is existing.
Yeah, I know. So I apologized before I said it. I did. I used the word "I'm sorry," guys. I did. I said "I'm sorry," everyone. But it's proper terminology. Well, the pharmacy law uses that terminology. We're trying to stay consistent with the pharmacy law because it's very. So making sure that our prescribers meet their requirements as well. Changing terminology. Yeah, so they're the ones that use the incorrect terminology. I know.
And my last suggestion on 1B, to add veterinary medical services to clarify who has to be identified in the animal patient record. I'm looking at another consistency issue in M now, which right now says any veterinary services or recommendations declined by the client. And I'm wondering if it would be either appropriate to strike medical from 1B, so it would just be veterinary services to the animal patient, or add medical here and then various other places, any veterinary medical services or recommendations declined by the client. I don't know if we need to get that specific, but I do think we need to maintain that consistency so that we don't have veterinary medical services in one part that can be potentially misconstrued in another subsection or paragraph.
Those veterinary services in the acts and regulations that
Yeah, I think taking out medical would solve that problem. Okay, so to be clear, going back to the revision to B1B, patient care being stricken and inserting veterinary services to the animal patient.
should we open it up for discussion up here?
Yeah, we talked about, I have a question, because we're talking about medications here and C1L. There's currently a requirement in physical exam that will vary with investigation. That has nothing to do with this, or is that here? What is that? So we currently have a requirement for physical exam within 12 hours. Is that still correct with this?
And that's a separate
Right here,
section.
it's a totally separate issue.
Separate section, so this is just what has to be in the.
Do we have any comments in the room on the rest of E1?
Money Lutz. Okay, I have just a couple of comments. On the breed, did we decide to put if known? I mean, can we possibly add if known? I totally understand Dr. Bradbury's comments about wanting to know the breed, especially if you've got a brachycephalic breed or one of those. That's critical, obviously. But I get this question all the time from my clients and, you know, who do a lot of rescue work or a lot of work with animal shelter dogs, you know, private practice, that, you know, we don't know what the breed is. We have no idea. Do we have to put the breed? So it would be great if you could just put if known. That way, if it's known and it's important, it's obviously important. But if it's not known, I hate to tell because frequently I'm in a position of telling my clients, just make something up based on what the dog looks like. But that really isn't the information that you want, Dr. Bradbury, because that's based on what the veterinarian thinks the dog looks like. So it really isn't, I wouldn't think, helpful from your perspective. So it would just help us if we could put if known. The other comment I have is I love M, except that I have a little problem with or recommendations. Because as you know, when the veterinarian is talking to the client, frequently they might say something like, you know, this dog needs more exercise, or you might consider having this dog, you know, put on vitamins, or you might do X, Y, Z. And those are sort of recommendations, but I think it's a terrible burden for a veterinarian to have to put down every single solitary recommendation he might make. I think it's more important to put down any veterinary services or veterinary medical services that are recommended and declined. That's critical, and I think that would be great to add to this, but I do have a problem with any recommendations because I can see a client coming back and saying, you know, well, you recommended that I take the dog to whatever, or I put the dog on vitamins, or not even vitamins, not even something that even borders on medical care. And then it's not written in the record and have my client get in trouble because he didn't write down some recommendation that he might have made on the way out of the room or something. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Grant Miller, CVMA. Yeah, so here we go. We read them over and over and over again. And then hearing comments from other people, you go, oh my gosh, I didn't think of that. So they look like this beautiful work of art, and then here we are. So going back to D, I'd like to also reiterate what Ms. Lutz said regarding breed. As a horse veterinarian, I find myself many times trying to guess. The first half of this horse looks like it's Morgan. The back half looks like it's quarter horse. I'm not totally sure. There is a professor at Western University who conducts studies of veterinarians, and she shows them photographs of dogs and asks them to predict the breed, and then she will DNA test the dogs. We're wrong like 80% of the time. So I'm wondering if we have age, approximate age, and then for sex and breed, it would be an if known. Species would be, we better figure out the species. We should be able to figure out the species and the color. So I'm wondering if we could maybe create for the sex and the breed portion, create an if known for that, and if so, how would that flow? And then the other part that I got to thinking about when we were talking about Section M regarding decline by the client or their authorized representative, I'm wondering if we need to go back to Section 1C to say name, address, and phone number of the client and the client's authorized representative if applicable. Thank you.
Any other comment in the room?
I'm sorry, 2 more comments, but they're a little bit more procedural. On Section I-2 regarding medications, so medications are plural. So then I think strength would need to be plural because then we have dosages that are plural. So it would be strengths, dosages, routes of administration. So we would want to just put S's at the end of those. And the same would go in L under the pre-anesthetic and anesthetic agents, that's plural. So it would then be dosages, routes of administration, and their strengths, plural. Thank you.
Moderator, can you please open it up for public comment online?
Thank you so much. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public wishes to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no request for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel? Okay.
So I just wanted to go back to a little bit, are we still in discussion? Just a couple more thoughts on the breed situation. I totally agree with Christina on breed. I mean, in the way that pet insurance does it, they have all the various normal breeds, cats and dogs, but they have mixed breed. And couldn't that mixed breed be put down as isn't that what is put down when it's a mutt, essentially, and then domestic short hair or whatever, cat, although the horse thing is a story. But I just wondered, because mixed breed, that could satisfy it, it seems to me. You don't know.
So mixed breed is a huge territory. And what we do is put down Chihuahua cross, Great Dane cross. Well, at least gives you an idea, some idea of what the dog looks like. So I don't think you know exactly what it is. We guess what it is, and we put, X after and then it's across.
And that's acceptable now under the current. Okay.
I do think we need to take each one of these and address them. I think it slipped through the cracks, but for example, subsection B1M, moving recommendations is a good idea. The recommendations.
I agree with that. Dr. Sullivan's comment, so if we can maybe remove that and everyone else is in agreement. And then I also like the adding of an S, but I guess I would put a parentheses there. Just for see, and if there's more than one. And that would, you guys know what I'm talking about there for.
Yeah, we can make that, that'd be a non-substantive change. We would just go through and make it consistent.
And then as for the breed, the problem with if known, I think, is again, and sex if known, is again, if we say if known, then it can just be left blank, even if it known. I guess people just, they were lazy, I guess, is what the concern is there. But I think even now, you know, if it's not known, people just put not known. I mean, when I'm putting things in records, it's just write not known or I guess.
Well, I would tell you that our software, it does not allow you to leave a blank. So you have to put something in. So there's no way, you cannot leave a blank, you cannot put breed, it's unknown, that you have to make a guess. So you have to put something in. So our medical software does not allow you to leave it blank.
So it just sounds like there's a consensus to leave it as is. Sorry, there was also a recommendation for B1-2 to add after client and authorized representative if applicable. You okay with that recommendation?
Yes.
Number B1, C, sorry, C, the whole two. B1C, add after client and authorized representative if applicable. Are you okay with that one? Okay. Can you scroll down to D, Jeff? So there was a request to change a number to an identification number. Oh, no. Jeff, can we take animal out, just have identification number? Of this, yeah. And if Dr. Sequoia has her hand up. Go ahead, Dr. Sequoia.
Can you hear me? Going back to breed, can you hear me? Yeah, I'd like to go back
You're really
to breed.
muffled. You're really muffled, Dr. Sequoia. If you
Can you hear me?
Like,
Can you hear me
hear
now?
you, but you're really loud.
Dr. Sequoia, it might help if
you hear me?
you move back from the microphone. Yes, but if you move back from the microphone, it might be easier to hear you.
Okay, you still can't hear me.
Let's give it a shot. Can you hear us, Dr. Sequoia? You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes. Okay, I'd like to quickly go back to breed. There's a consideration you may not have thought of.
Okay.
There's a consideration you may not have thought of. Okay, in terms of breed. Okay, I don't know what to do. That insurance companies are looking at breed. Municipalities are looking at breed, and they have banned certain breeds. So if a veterinarian writes down in the record that it's XYZ breed, this is for small animal, not getting into horses, and the client loses insurance, there's a problem.
Dr. Sequoia. Dr. Summer, I'm so sorry to interrupt. It's really hard to understand you in the room. If you wouldn't mind chat opening, so we're going to have the moderator open the chat for you to, if you could type your comments in. It's just really hard to understand.
She's talking about insurance companies and them having a problem with like bully breeds and basically, and if I think I'm understanding you, Dr. Sequoia, that they are, they're having concerns with different breeds. And I think that's what she's saying. She's saying something about the breed. If we enter breed, then there are some insurance companies that will decline services based on the breed.
This is a moderator. I have opened the chat, so if Diane Sequoia would like to add anything, she can type it in the chat and send it to everyone.
Moderator, the chat is not open for me.
So perhaps this is a good time to take a break, and Dr. Sequoia, if you wouldn't mind just shooting me a quick email, and I'll read any comments you'd like to share.
Okay, if we can take a 10-minute break, and we will start back at 11:35. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's go take a look.
I see what I did it. This is my last year. Oh, God. Okay. They put it back together, and you know, I've got a thing. Yeah. I did everything. And I just know it's my car, but I don't know my car today. That's the way it works.
All right, we will return from our meeting, or from our break, and continue on. Thank you. Okay. Is everybody good to go? Okay, it looks like we did not receive an email or chat message from Dr. Sequoia, so hopefully Christy's explanation explained her concerns. Christy, did you?
Yeah, I did have one follow-up clarification on the change in B1C. Dr. Miller's comments. I think it was name, address, and phone number of the client, and then I would do as Jessica previously indicated, and if applicable, the client's authorized representative, I think was what you had indicated, not what's right, authorized with a D. Yes. Clients. The client's authorized. No, at the front, up before authorized. The client's. Yes. Oh. Apostrophe S. Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
I did just receive an email from Dr. Sequoia, so I'll just read her comments. I am concerned about breed and small animal practice. A number of insurance companies and municipalities have banned certain breeds of dogs. This could result in clients having their insurance canceled or not renewed if the medical record lists their dog as being a banned or high-risk breed. Give Dr. Grant's comments about the Western U research showing the vets guess the dog breed incorrectly 80% of the time. This seems like a disservice to the consumer.
Kathy?
I don't have a great answer, but I wanted to go back to the breed word again and see if there's any qualifiers or anything that we might be able to put in that makes some of these unknowns. I know obviously the software requires something, wondering if the language
we say, it seems so random, probable breed if known, or possible breed if known, or, I mean, something, I think Dr. Sequoia's point is well taken, because at the end of the day, if you submit something to the insurance company and it's something, but that may be a problem anyway. That's probably a problem already now. But I just wonder given the public comment we've had, if anybody has any better ideas other than just leaving it as is.
In many years of practice, I think we're overdoing this a bit. In many years of practice, I always filled it out, and if there was a question, it was a mixed breed. And there was always something stated, and if it was a predominant Chihuahua or Great Dane, it was Chihuahua mixed, Great Dane mixed, whatever. I think we're focusing way more than what we need to be, and some of this area we don't have any control over what insurance companies do.
All right. Just one clarification. So in M, did you strike the word or recommendations in sub B? Yeah. You did? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. The next subsection is B2, and this is a new section that includes the addition of the title group medical record and would define the circumstances when a group medical record would be required to be prepared. This is the same species are treated at the same time for the same purpose at the same location. It would also include an introductory phrase that prescribes what the minimum content requirements for a group medical record are, and that's the newly added subsections B2, A through J. So these are the same medical record requirements that are in the single patient medical record section being applied to the group medical record requirements for the reasons described previously. Subsection B2F1 is a proposal that would add records requirements for group examination findings and data as opposed to the physical examination findings set forth in the single patient medical records requirement noted previously, and that any data obtained by instrumentation, laboratory testing, diagnostic imaging, and necropsy must be recorded in the medical record. B2F2 adds that if the data in subsection B2F2 is obtained as specified, then the interpretation of that data must be included in the medical record. H4, this change would add a new requirement to document withdrawal times from meat, milk, or egg products, which is normally required to be done prior to going into the food chain. And those are the substantive changes, or the main changes, differences between the two. Kathy?
And this is, of course, weird coming from a lifelong vegetarian, but in this, the phase out or the withdrawal times, it says meat, milk, eggs. Should fish production be in there since fish are, or fish considered meat in the language of California regulations?
I think they are. In anything that I've ever done, it's always been meat, milk, and egg withdrawal times.
Okay, thank you. Just wondered.
You may want to make the similar changes that we did for individuals mirror what we did for what we're doing for group medical records.
The only difference would be that the patient identifying information is different for a group, so that is in 2D. So that there wouldn't be any, unless you have changes to 2D, there wouldn't be any of those conforming changes from the individual patient.
There would be on, I think, on H, or rather on I, any veterinary services or recommendations declined by the client, we would be removing recommendations or recommendations.
So it would be changes to 2B, C, and I. That would be carried over to the group unless you object to any of those changes, but it would be the 2B would be names of the individuals providing veterinary services to the animal patient, name, address, and phone number of the client, and comma, if applicable, comma, the client's authorized representative. I would be any veterinary services declined by the client or their authorized representative.
Do we have any more comment up here? Can we take public comment from the room on this section?
Yeah, there's a discussion.
Any discussion? Okay, do we have any public comment from the room on subsection B2?
Grant Miller, CBMA. So if you're willing to accept the plural changes that I suggested in the previous section, then that would also carry over to F.
Right.
Strike that, H, 2, and 3. So it would be strengths, dosages, routes of administration.
It would be the ellipses, like Dr. Bradbury. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm still learning everyone's names. Dr. Bradbury had recommended, so it'd be an S with the ellipses around it. So it could be singular or plural, depending on the circumstances.
Thank you.
Right.
Do we have any other comment from the room? Moderator, can we please open it up for public comment online?
Thank you so much. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no request for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Please.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have any more discussion on B2? Yeah.
It's all of 2. All of 2? Have you gotten there? B2. No, you're on B.
No. You good?
Yep.
Okay. Subsection C, this proposal would revise existing subsection B by removing the current requirement for maintaining medical records for 3 years after the animal's last visit, and would change it to 3 years after the date of the last entry into the medical record. In addition, the requirement for the provision of a summary of the medical record be provided to the client is struck and replaced with the requirement that a copy of the medical record be provided upon request. The current requirements for a summary to be provided sooner and depending would be replaced with a requirement for providing the medical record immediately if the animal patient is in critical condition. The revision is also necessary, or this revision is necessary to eliminate the option of the licensee being required to write a summary of the medical records and requires them to make a copy of medical records available to the client upon request. This change is meant to avoid fraud in the record-keeping process and clarify that the medical records are recorded at the time of the exam and development of the treatment plan and cannot be editorialized later by a summary of the medical records. Dr. Bradbury.
I have a huge problem with the immediate thing. This is, to me, not doable in many situations. The idea that, for example, I can speak from a specialty emergency setting. I get a case transferred to me on Monday morning, and the animal has acute kidney injury, for example, and I assess it, and I think this needs to be transferred to UC Davis for dialysis, and there's a lot of medical records that I need to go through and summarize when I'm writing my final SOAP, which I often would be there until midnight writing a complete SOAP so that I could make sure it was a complete record at the end. And in those situations, rather than stopping and not addressing other patients that need to be cared for and spending an hour and a half making the final SOAP so that this patient could be transferred with immediate complete records, I would write a summary, and we would copy the rest of the records, and then later would finish my records, which then I guess based on this would be considered fraud because my records may have other things in it aside from what was in the summary. So that's just my thoughts for that sort of a situation with the immediate complete record. I think a summary is adequate in those situations. I understand why, and I've reviewed cases where I've seen the changes that have been made later and editorialized, so I understand the intent, but I think that this is not necessarily going to be protecting the consumer. I can imagine in a mobile equine practitioner who has most of the records at their home or at their clinic, and suddenly they're being, you know, asked to provide, like, oh, you need to go have surgery here, and now how are they supposed to immediately provide all of the records if they're in a truck driving around? I could imagine that in an academic setting, if there was a resident that was seeing a case and the student is working on it, those records are often completed in a more complete, very thorough form later. And so I feel like, and I also noted that by adding this immediate requirement would be a problem with based on the regulatory recommendations. So I would ask to remove that terminology.
So the problem is the word sooner is vague, so it says 5 days or sooner. And so I think we were just trying to figure out what the standard is, and so my request of the subcommittee was, what is the standard? And I was told it was immediately. So if that's not the standard, then we could change it, but I just don't know because I'm not a practitioner. So, but there needs to be some clarification as to what sooner means, and that's what the proposed change is meant to address.
I was reading that the removal of summary and adding immediate was what the problem was, but that's okay. Go ahead, Tara.
I'm concerned about changing summary to copy.
Right. So
because
I wasn't sure whether she was done with her, Ms. Ussery was done with her presentation on the issue, but in your memo on page 8, there's a note on my advice, and the issue is that the current statute 4855 mandates that the board can only require a summary. So this regulation would be inconsistent because you're striking summary and saying a copy needs to be provided, but you can't require the veterinarian to provide a copy. Currently, under law, the law was enacted in 1978, and maybe in 1978 it was easier to do a summary than to provide a copy. But regardless, that's kind of where we are legally. And so I advised the subcommittee that this proposal as written couldn't move forward to strike the summary requirement because it would be probably found to be inconsistent with the statute in 4855. So the question would be, do you want to recommend removal of the copy at this time or leave the summary, or there may be another option we can consider?
So I misstated that. I'm just going to, can I just finish my thought with that? I don't know that I misstated it, but I agree with not a full copy and providing a summary. And it's because of the immediate terminology, but anyway.
Jessica?
So I don't think Marie was done with her presentation because she was going to address that issue.
Why I didn't.
For conflicting with legislation. But if it, Dr. Barber, just to understand your concern, if it was changed, because sooner is current law. And so if we change it back to sooner and keep it current law, do you have the same problems with removing summary versus copy?
So my issue, I'm sorry, I think I just, as I said, I think I misstated it or wasn't clear. My concern is changing it from a summary to a copy of the record, and because that's implying that the record is complete at that, whereas a summary allows the person in the critical condition to write a summary of the case and send it. versus a complete copy of the records. So yes, I think keeping things as summary, we could say immediately, changing that terminology, an immediate summary, I think is fine, but an immediate copy of the entire record is what I'm concerned about. Yeah, the reason we did copy versus summary, that's where you're going with that, was really for consumer protection. A lot of the time, I think it's the approach we were taking is it was kind of outdated because with the electronic medical records now, a lot of that is completed fairly quickly and is emailed directly to the client or to the referral hospital. So that was the way that we were looking at it, was that perhaps summary was outdated and could be detrimental to the consumer for the reasons that we stated in the memo.
Also, a copy of the medical records, you get a copy of it. And so the thought was the consumers will have better access to get their copy. It doesn't say complete. I think whatever you have documented at the time, that's what we want to be provided to the client. But as far as if that's the concern that you can't do that immediately, then I suggest maybe looking at moving it back to what current law said sooner.
I think Dr. Sequoia had her hand up first. Dr. Sequoia, did you have something you wanted to add?
Okay, yes, thank you. I would like a definition of days, 5 days. Is that business days or calendar days? Thank you.
It's presumed calendar unless you put the word business in front of the word days.
Thank you.
That's from the Office of Administrative Law.
Thanks.
Dr.
I'm glad we're talking about summary because I've had an issue with this for about the last decade. I get records because legally they can give me a summary. I get records that literally say, on this day, Fido got a DHPP and rabies. On this day, it had diarrhea. On that day, it had vomiting, and that's it. And they say, oh, I only have to provide a summary. That's obviously not enough to be able to do anything with. But legally, I think they're covered. So summary needs to be worked on anyway, whatever we do here. Summary just doesn't cut it. Yes, I think then that would be good to me, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we need to do some verbiage to say an immediate summary, but complete record copy by 5 days. If it's an emergency, an immediate summary, but a complete copy of the record in 5 days. Because if you're not finishing your records in 5 days, so maybe that should be the framework we should work around.
So I'm confused. What's an immediate summary? Do you know what that, what does that include?
Immediate summary of the case to get it to the doctor, to the referral.
Oh, okay.
And it may be a copy of the record that you have up until that point.
Okay, so would it include all the topics that are covered in the group and medical records, or would it be only a portion of what's in there? So we'd have to work that out.
Can I just ask clarification? Because summary is existing law, and so why would we have to then define summary if we're not changing existing law?
So currently, it just says you have to have a summary, and it says what the summary contains. You've changed subdivision A so that subdivision B, so it says medical records shall be prepared in accordance with the requirements of this section and according to whether veterinary services are being provided to a single animal patient or a group animal patient. The current regulation is not set up like that. So you'd have to define what the summary for a group animal patient record and the summary for a single animal patient record would need to contain. You'd have to suss that out.
Okay, so
the current regulation actually cherry picks the topics. It doesn't cover everything that's in the medical record. It is a summary of certain salient items. That's what I've seen with the current regulations. So the question would be, would you want to cherry pick what needs to absolutely be in the summary for immediate purposes, or do you actually want a summary of all the items as applicable that are in the group or the single animal patient medical record? Does that make sense?
I would say the intent would be, however you word it, a summary of the critical issues of the emergency case to be able to be transferred to another.
Right, but how do you determine what are the critical issues?
Whatever the presenting symptoms are.
Right, so the regulation currently, as it's written, actually says what you have to summarize, like the treatment, the examination, the dates.
We could leave that.
So, because right now it treats all records the same. Right now your proposal is to separate records into group versus individual patient and have different criteria for each type of record. So your summaries are going to have to track whether it's an individual record or a group record.
Couldn't we write in either case, in both group and single medical records, a summary shall include, or just as defined by? Well, but we could list out what's here and just, or, I mean, as previously defined by how we defined it before?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Do you want to cross-reference back to the section that you think should be in the summary, or do you just want to say everything in B1, everything in B2? A summary of everything in B1 or B2 as applicable, right? So do you see what I'm saying? Because right now, the summary includes different subject matter than what you're proposing right now. You've changed it as we've discussed, right? You've made changes. So that's going to need to be reflected in the summaries. And so what should those contain at a minimum for immediate care?
But if you make them contain everything that's in B1 and B2, that's a copy of the record. That's not a summary.
Well, that's my point. So but I don't know what you would like to see.
So perhaps if you guys want to keep summary, and under C, it says the summary shall include, and then you have what current law is. So perhaps you can say specify in there the summary, and then just add, the only thing you're adding is for both single and group records, and then go on with existing law.
Right, but you've amended these topics here. So would you show just these topics as the summary for the immediate care?
Like, for one, we would say name and address of client in animal, however we defined it before. We would just redefine those in the way that they've been redefined.
Yeah. So the thought would be you would keep consistent law of what's required in the summary, make it clear that it applies to both single and group, and then make the corresponding changes in 1 through 7 to mirror how we did it there.
So we'll need to document exactly has to be written in the record for this meeting. So can we suss out how that's going to look here?
Yeah, perhaps since it's noon, perhaps it's a good time to take a break. We can take a look at providing that language, and then we could display it for everybody.
So like a working lunch, or rather lunch?
It's noon.
So, I mean, it's up to you, but if we want, we can take a half-hour break for a lunch. You guys can have a lunch, and then I can go and I can display it on the screen, make the corrections, so you guys see it.
Can we, I mean, do we have to take, we can't go through the rest of this and then?
You can, yeah.
We have to break right this minute? Which is that a break? I mean, that's.
People might want to eat, so.
I'm just asking that question.
Okay, I think Kathy had something first.
Yeah, I just had a clarifying question on this, and I know there's more work to be done now that, gosh, we've discussed it. But when Dr. Bradbury first talked, and I realized we have summary versus full client record, or patient record to the client as requested, and then there's a summary with a critical animal, a critical condition situation, and I took Dr. Bradbury's comments to heart on that needs to be a summary that you can do quickly, transfer, get the animal treated, and then continue to do the finished soap and the report. But are we talking about two different things? Like a client should be able to request the full records and not just get a summary. I understand the AOL or I'm sure the regs folks think summary has to stay because it was already there, but there's two different things going on here, right? An immediate, urgent, critical condition and a client's right to request the animal records. Is that, okay, I just wanted to, that's what I took it to be.
And
Okay.
so right now, legally, you cannot make the copy a mandatory requirement. You'd have to wait to amend the legislation in your act to get amending legislation.
And if we go, and that's a point of discussion, but I think we have plenty of evidence where summaries have been incorrect and that the animal record, and that's happened in disciplinary actions, and so there's a lot of evidence to show that the record should be complete. Okay.
Okay, so I'm just seeking clarification that right now we're going back to existing reg on summary.
Only for immediate, urgent needs for immediate patient care, not for your everyday run-of-the-mill request for animal patient records.
To the extent we're going to mandate types of records that have to be provided, it needs to be consistent with Business and Professions Code Section 4855, which right now only requires a summary be provided. So I would recommend, if you're moving forward with mandating either a summary immediately or a copy within 5 days, that you get that statute amended as well.
Yeah, so the recommendation from the committee would be to pursue a legislative proposal to fix that.
Great. But we couldn't discuss that, though.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
But that's the thought, is we do that and then move this one forward after it. They don't want to do two separate packages.
So I guess my question to the committee is, do you understand that would mean the entire package would have to wait until you got legislation to correct just that issue?
Yes, we're aware of that. We've discussed that.
Yeah.
No, but does the committee know that you will probably have to wait 2 years to make that change?
It's written really clearly in the memo.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure I'll understand that.
Lived with it this long, another year or two, and the scope of regulations.
Yeah, but you could get your other policy objectives changed if you agree with those other changes that you would like to implement in terms of group versus individual, but you could get that part done, and then the summary part could be done at a later date.
That would be very confusing to the licensees. We want to get an end product that is done clear and
okay,
well.
just as long as you know that would be, you would have to put all your other policy objectives on hold until that one issue is addressed. There is one other legal issue, too, which is SB 669, which supersedes part of this proposal as well. So you'd have to address that or make conforming changes to this regulation to recognize that RBT vaccine administration documentation will be different than what you have in this regulation.
Before we break and try to wordsmith some of this stuff, is there any public comment from the room?
First, I want to say yikes, seriously. I'm really glad that you came full circle back to the summary, because requiring veterinarians to immediately provide a copy of the record would be a disaster. First of all, veterinarians don't have time to immediately have the records complete. And then, somebody said, well, then a more complete copy could be sent later. That's where you get into this issue of fraud, because we get into that all the time, where my clients will say, once I knew that they were going to complain to the board, I added things that I had forgotten. And then the records come to you, and you've got two sets. You've got one set from the client. You've got one set that we sent you. And now you're saying fraud because the client changed the record. So I think we need to be really careful about thinking in terms of sending a set of the records immediately you know, with the understanding that they're not complete, and then sending another set later, because that's when my clients are going to be all accused of fraud, even though they didn't intend it to be that way. So I really would caution you. The other thing is the summaries are really, they're good. I mean, we do a lot of summaries for our clients. We can do them pretty quickly, and we do comply with the list of what's supposed to be included, and it appears to me that those things, if you do them completely, are enough for the next vet to be able to use. One other thing, I do a lot of regulatory work for a large pet store that has vaccine clinics, and I have reviewed all the practice acts in all of the states in the United States, and there's not another state that requires a summary. Their regulations are usually really vague about medical records, and I understand that's a big problem in those states because it's so vague that nobody understands what they're supposed to send when. So I think it's great that you're doing this. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Dan Baxter from the CVMA, and just drawing on my own personal experience, it's similar to Ms. Lutz's. I wholeheartedly agree with her comments.
Okay, don't see any other comments in the room. Moderator, can you please open it up for public comment online?
Thank you. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no request for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Do we have any additional discussion?
I just, do we need to put this on hold until we can put the 669 wording into this?
No, our Regulation Council provided some language yesterday, and so I can, when we display it on the screen, I'll put that in there as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, it is.
Half an hour because Dr. Bradbury has to leave early, so I want to make sure she's here.
Okay, so we will break for a short lunch and be back at 12:45. Thank you. Okay, we will call the meeting back to order then. It's 12:47. And look for our post-lunch update to this topic, Marie.
Yeah, so we will have a little more discussion and display what Jessica worked on over lunch. However, it is going to be the recommendation of the subcommittee to table the rest of this material until the January meeting to allow people, stakeholders, more time to review the language and everything that we've done that's new, substantive changes. Do you want to go over your stuff first?
Sure. So Jeff is displaying the changes on the screen. What's in yellow, we'll take that part first on this page, and then at the very end of the proposal is to address 669, which talks about what's required in the medical records for RVTs when they're administering the vaccinations. So we're calling out except as provided.
Can we have it larger on our screen?
Jeff, would you mind enlarging it, please?
It might have to do with the moderator. I don't know.
It's showing now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's good.
And then, Jeff, if you don't mind scrolling down to the very end of the proposal. So this is also addressing, this from our Regulation Council, so thank you, Christy, for providing this to account for the changes in AB 669.
You'll need to add the note in the section 4827, I think. Let me see. In the reference section, there's a new statutory section that we're interpreting here. So that would be, I think I had in my draft, but let me see.
So it'd be, Jeff, under sections before 4855, it'd be 4826.7 underlined.
Right.
And then, Jeff, if you don't mind jumping to page, the bottom of page 3, where it says C. So we added single or group, changed it to medical records. We changed it to where it would now read, a summary of the animal's medical records shall be made available to the client immediately upon request, and then a copy of the medical records shall be made available to the client and then keep existing law within 5 days or sooner upon their request. And the summary, and we underlined for single and group medical records shall include. 1 through 7 is reflecting current law, except for the changes that we made today are reflected for current law. So those are the changes that we made over lunch, but we do feel that since this is substantive changes and we haven't had a lot of time for the board members, or the MDC members, the board members, or stakeholders to review that, we would like to table it until January.
So the question I have was, I thought you wanted to keep the copy requirement and then have the summary just for immediate urgent care. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So could we scroll back to the top?
So it currently says a summary, so we're keeping the summary for immediately upon request. And then it says a copy of the medical records shall be made available to the client.
So we're looking at C, Jeff. This is current B, but sub C. Can we scroll to that?
Can you go to the next page, please? Yeah, where it says a summary, there.
So is it, if the animal is in critical condition, the summary should be made available to the client immediately upon request? And then a copy is available for all other purposes? I thought that's what Dr. Sullivan was saying. Is that correct, Dr. Sullivan? If there is an animal in critical condition, then the summary has to be provided immediately upon request.
Well, I think, actually, I like this a little better in that not all referrals are emergencies. It may be a fracture that needs a repair by a specialist that clinic can't do. So they need to get the at least a summary of the medical records to that specialist right away so they can get it set up. But the complete records should be available by 5 days. So I think it can cover, I think it's a little broader here, and I think it's fine.
Okay, so then it should say upon their request in the first sentence at the top of that page. At the top of that, this page 4, upon their request.
I think it says that right. It says a summary of medical records shall be made available to the client immediately upon their request.
Well, he just stuck it in there right now. It was just said upon request. So I just thought we could add that qualifier.
Oh, got it. I said the there part. Got it.
It's there, yeah.
As I'm looking at this, you know, something else to consider when we're talking about the summary and emergent situations and stuff. I can't think, at least in my large animal experience, of a incident where there's going to be an emergency where an entire group is referred, where that's going to come into play. Right. The only caveat to that might be a reportable disease where the state vet is going to come out and view the entire herd or flock or something like that. But otherwise, you're not going to have an emergency situation where a summary is going to be necessary for an entire group of animals, at least on the large animal side of things.
Yeah, I thought that when this was kind of going on before the break, but I guess if it's not too difficult to put that in there, it would be good to just have it be complete, because who knows if there's, I don't know.
So it sounds like you're recommending, instead of having the summary apply to group medical records, you want that specific to a single medical record. So you would do a summary of the single medical records in that first sentence. No, just under the first sentence where it says a summary of.
It's on the other page.
The single.
It's the first sentence at the top of the page, yeah.
So Jeff, it should read a summary of the single medical records. And then, Jeff, where it says on the last sentence of that paragraph, the summary for a single, can you delete and group? Okay. And we'd have to have that reflected in the ledge proposal that we're also going to do. But again, because it's going to be tabled, so we'll work through those issues prior to the January meeting.
Yeah, I guess I was saying that I thought we should leave it in there.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not sure why you're doing that, but unless it's, I mean, there's two different opinions, but I just thought leaving it in there in case there was a situation would just be more complete if we're doing this, and then we don't have to later be like, oh, we came into this situation and. Dr. Waterhouse?
I agree, because while it'd be highly unusual, it doesn't mean in the future that there couldn't be some.
Talk to the mic. Into the mic.
It's on. That couldn't be, something happened in the future, that there was some poisoning or some toxicity of some kind, that happened to a whole herd of cattle or some such thing. So the possibilities are out there; they're just rare. So I would probably leave it in.
I think in those cases, usually a representative example of that disease or problem or poisoning would be referred to the lab as opposed to the whole herd being referred. So that would be an individual. Anyway, it's up to the committee.
Okay. So I think we can take that back and work on it and bring it back in January.
Okay, is there any public comment in the room?
So I finished chewing. Grant Miller, CVMA. So in going back to that, I'm assuming that where you're going with the summary is you're going to have a summary requirement for single animal patient and a summary requirement for herd or plural animal patients. Is that the idea?
Well, we were talking about using the summary for emergent situations where they needed the information right away, right? And so we were discussing whether or not that was necessary for a group, if you're going to refer an entire group, or whether it's representative samples from an individual at that point anyway.
Okay. It could be for a group if there's a potential zoonotic disease and the state vet needs information right away. But a couple of things. One, if we're going to say single, it should be a single animal patient's medical record, because a single record just means a record. Second, depending on what you require the summary to include, that could potentially be impossible. And the reason is because if we have data that is out at the lab or that is being processed at the time the animal is transferred, currently data is required to be in the summary. but if you make it immediate, I cannot have data and my interpretation of the data in the summary. So that's going to have to be addressed. I was hoping that what we would do is move away from the immediate, because existing law of 5 days or sooner has been institutionalized for over 35 years, and veterinarians understand very well that if the animal's in critical condition, you really need to get the record as soon as possible, or a summary of the record as soon as possible in. And they know that that summary has this abbreviated 1 through 7 section. And I think that that 1 through 7 section actually works both for a herd and for a single animal. So all we would have to do is just reinstitutional. We would just have to unstrike out section B.
Yeah, so that's what we were displaying prior to you coming in. That was the direction of the subcommittee, was to reinstitute current law for the summary, but make the reflected changes that were made here today for that current law.
Okay, so if that current law is that way, then the immediately is going to be very difficult for at least some of the components of the summary.
No, immediate is still in there for summary, but I think these are all things, because there's a lot of comments about it, those are all things that can be discussed prior to the January meeting.
Any other comments from the room?
Okay, Bonnie Lutz. I guess I'm just a little confused. And that is that normally, in my experience anyway, when a vet sends a client to another vet in an emergency situation, the records are sent to the other vet. And there's a provision in the Practice Act for that. So the records that would be available at the time are sent, and vet number 2 understands that they're getting the records that were available at the time because the pet needed emergency care. So I guess I don't quite understand the need for providing an immediate summary to the actual client, since that sounds like that's going to be a problem anyway, when the vet can send the records, and it's easy to send them directly to the vet that they're referring the animal to. So I guess I just don't understand.
So I know we're tabling this, but I would just say, as somebody who gets patients referred to me, that does not always happen, and often does not happen due to staffing shortages and the like. We often receive patients without any information, and the clients asked for it and it's been denied. So it would be great if that did happen across the board, but it doesn't, and it is a problem. We are operating blind and starting over, and cost the clients a lot of money to repeat tests that were done, and when we could have just had a little written summary that was provided. So just as we move into January, one of my last comments on this topic until it comes to the board. So thank you.
Moderator, can we please open it up to public comment online?
Thank you. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Can we have a motion to table this till January? We don't need it. Oh. All right. Thank you. We'll just move on to number 6. Agenda item 6 is our update, discussion, and potential recommendations on ledge proposal for BPC section 4875.1 regarding complaint prioritization, and that subcommittee is Drs. Bradbury and Sequoia.
Okay, thank you. So the first part of the update in the memo goes over our quarterly expert roundtable, and we had 2 of those since we didn't have a meeting in July for the MDC. So these have been, I think, really helpful for the subject matter experts. I won't go into a ton of detail about each one. There's some good details in the memo, but overall, they're being well received, and it does seem to be improving the dialogue between the subject matter experts and the staff, as well as I think the quality is going to improve when it comes to their reports and their understanding of what's required in the reports. At this last meeting, we went through sort of the whole process, and I think that was really helpful for them. The main part of this of our subcommittee that I think was the most important and sort of the part that we need to talk about here today is the complaint prioritization and review. The strategic plan, Objective 1.4, asked us to analyze effectiveness of current complaint prioritization defined in BPC section 4875.1. And that was broken down into two subsections, which included first to create a data report over the last few fiscal years of where complaints fall within the complaint prioritization, and second, to draft a memo to present potential recommendations to the board. So we were able to work on this over the last kind of two, before the July meeting, which didn't happen, and then again, we met again this more recently. We've provided you with some attachments, which should be at the end, and that looks at, if we go down to attachment 2, it talks about the complaints received by violation type. And if you look at this, there's a large section or segment, 37% in 22-23 that were negligence and incompetence. And in 21-22, it was 38%. 2021, it was 54%. And even going back further, 50%. So it's a big chunk of what the complaints are alleging. And what we were concerned with is that if everything that came in for negligence and incompetence was being lumped into the top priority, is that really protecting consumers if every single complaint that had negligence and incompetence was being lumped into that. So that was looking at the first bit of data that sort of stood out to us. So we also wanted to review how other healing arts boards prioritize complaints, because we wondered if perhaps there was a better way to do this, and discuss if there's anything that we can do differently. The other healing arts boards, aside from, I believe, the medical board and what was the other? The podiatry board. All the other ones have to go. They basically fall under this whole. It's the California Department of Consumer Affairs Complaint Prioritization and Referral Guidelines. That is attachment 3 in your memos. And they are required to follow these guidelines. And part of what is required in this is that in the top 2 categories, they are referred to the Division of Investigation, or DOI. So we looked at those, and while some of these guidelines seem to make sense to sort of categorize them that way, the fact that they would have to be referred to the Division of Investigation, we didn't feel like that was necessary in many cases, and I'll go through why here, and it's outlined in the memo as well. But in any case, We are exempt from that because of BPC Section 4875.1. So we are statutorily required to follow 4875.1. So that takes precedence over the other Department of Consumer Affairs guidelines. So when we polled the other member boards through the AAVSB membership and participation that Jessica has been working so diligently, and she's been able to have these relationships. And what we found there is that most of the, at least all of the boards that replied had no statutes or regulations outlining complaint prioritization. So we're sort of unique in that manner, at least from what we can tell with the people that replied to us. So we came to the conclusion that we do need to change something in order to protect consumers. It's clear that lumping everything into negligence and incompetence was basically putting a large majority of our cases as top priority, and it isn't necessarily helping our enforcement team or the public. But then we had to figure out how do we move forward and how should this change occur. So initially, my thought was, oh, well, we can, just write things similar to the, we could use the Department of Consumer Affairs guidelines, because that looked like a pretty good way of doing things. And if we wanted to do that, we would be repealing BPC Section 4875.1, and there's no other board that has this statute, so that was like, well, that would make sense. But and then the other option is to amend BPC 4875.1, which is, of course, a bigger task. But when we looked at repealing it, we would be then required to use DOI for most complaints. And we've recently, over the last few years, been able to really streamline things and remove DOI from unnecessary investigations, because much of what we do is taken care of by our subject matter experts and our analysts, and there's not that many cases that are requiring the DOI to go out and do investigations. And that has really helped both our efficiency and our the costs associated with all of these investigations. So after a lot of discussion, we decided that we really can't repeal BPC Section 4875.1, because then we would be mandated to follow the guidelines for referring everything to the DOI. So then the question was, what do we do? And we decided that we should amend BPC Section 4875.1 in a way that might streamline the complaint process and improve consumer and animal protection. So the recommendations that we came up with, we're trying to improve the prioritization in the negligence and incompetence category. And the first amendment we were recommending is to amend subdivision A1 to add immediate in front of danger, and add an animal patient or the public in animal health and safety to mirror subdivision A8. So it would read, negligence or incompetence that involves death or serious bodily injury to an animal patient such that the veterinarian or registered veterinary technician represents an immediate danger to an animal patient or the public and animal health and safety. And this is to further define, what is, or I should say further clarify what should be top priority. We also felt like a definition for serious bodily injury was needed. That could, everybody thinks it's a serious bodily injury, and serious bodily injury has been defined previously, and we decided to,
utilize a previous legal definition of it and define it as, for purposes of this section, serious bodily injury means loss of limbs and or body parts and or loss or impairment of bodily functions. And then finally, in the prioritization, unlicensed practice is not listed, and we think that this should be a top priority, and we would like to add that to the priority list. So with that, any comments, questions from the committee? Yes, Kathy.
Thank you. This was really interesting. I know you guys have been working on this very hard for the last few years. I had one quick question, and I mean, maybe it's fine. It just seems a little redundant in the ledge proposal for 4875.1, negligence or incompetence that involves the death or serious bodily injury to an animal, such that the vet represents an immediate danger to the animal patient. Isn't that a little redundant? Aren't they already? I mean, I don't know how else to word it, but it just seemed
yeah. We kind of went back and forth on this language, and I think the reality is that there's a lot of times that a patient dies and is not actually related to the treatment. And the way it had been interpreted currently, with it just saying represents a danger, was very sort of vague, and to be safe, they were being lumped into like everything was a danger. Well, this could be a danger, you know, and instead of it being like, oh, this is really something very egregious and needs to be addressed now. So I think that was the thought process to add that to the wording.
One other quick question, and you may know it from your review of all this and all the back and forth with staff. It was interesting on the pie charts, the negligence and incompetence went down by about, I don't know, 15 points or whatever in the last couple of cycles, from 54 to 38 or whatever. I see a couple of unprofessional going up slightly, but is there a reason why? Are they just being categorized slightly differently when they're coming in through the breeze system, or
I'm not
is it just
sure.
the luck of the draw? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Do you guys have any idea on that, Rob or Jessica or Matt?
That doesn't work too well. As far as the changes go, I think that COVID, and when that happened, I think that's when we saw that pie chart shift a little bit when it comes to those portions. And we were getting some complaints, and I think Kim can probably attest to this too. We were getting complaints where it would fall into that general unprofessional conduct bucket because it wasn't necessarily a negligence or incompetence, but there was a concern, but it wasn't something you could really pin directly to that. So that's what was happening. I think there were a lot of things that changed with COVID, especially just given the situation. People weren't able to go back. They felt like there was something wrong. One of the big things with the complaints that we get, and I think Dr. Bradbury covered it, is just the complainants are really going to want to sell you on why this person is, they're killing patients. So you need to see my complaint first. I'm not going to wait. I'm going to call you and call you and call you and tell you how much of a threat there is. And of course, based on the numbers, the vast majority of complaints that we investigate do not end in enforcement action. So, yeah, I would assume that things getting back to normal, I think these pieces are going to shift again. But for now, I think that was, in my opinion, that was probably one of the big things that caused that shift.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I was looking at number 3. I was assuming that we're addressing licensees. I mean, in cite and fine, unlicensed activity, it goes to the top category there. So I was just wondering, does it really fit
in the priority list. I don't know exactly where it fits since we can't do, they don't have a license. We have to go through a DA.
Jessica, did you?
Yeah, so that's true, and not necessarily through the DA because we can do citations through the administrative route, but this is how we are prioritizing cases as soon as they come in the door. And so it says in A that this is basically to maximize consumer protection based on the resources that we have. And so it's regardless of what it ends up in being, it's how we're prioritizing cases as soon as they come in. And so currently, unlicensed practice doesn't fall under this category. And so regardless of the outcome that happens, we want to see where in this priority, right now it's not in there. The subcommittee is recommending it be added in, but they need the assistance from the communication from the MDC of where you think that that should fall.
Okay, I don't see any, is there anybody with a hand up? I don't see any hands up. Okay, any public comment in the room?
Okay, Bonnie Lutz. I'm assuming from what you're saying that the determination as to whether it's negligence or incompetence is made when you get the initial complaint. And I'm very concerned about that because I agree with Rob. I get to see what you send me in the initial letters that pretty much, I think, gives me the exact wording of what the complaint says. And the clients have gotten, I don't know if they've gotten smarter or if there's something out there on the internet that they've read, but they're getting, their complaints seem to be different to me. They seem to be more in detail. A lot of them, obviously, we do manage to defend. But in a lot of cases, I think because the client is making the complaint sound so bad and they're calling it negligence and incompetence, that those cases are being put into that negligence and incompetence category without a subject matter expert review, that would lead to a lot of the complaints being put in that category that might not need to be based on the new definition. I mean, I understand that you have to have categories, and I do like the beefing up of the definition.
Grant Miller, CVMA. A word of caution on 4875.1. We embarked with the board about 13 years ago to amend 4875.1 and specifically to include unlicensed activity as a priority. And that adventure was not successful. And I will share more with you should you choose individually, but I would caution you in opening up this statute. As an offer of another possibility, maybe you could consider how the board is looking at something like incompetence in determining whether or not somebody is truly incompetent. So for instance, if in a single case they demonstrated incompetence in performing a physical exam, yet in a plethora of their other patients they were not, then perhaps incompetence is not the right term to use. I don't know because I'm not involved at that level. But I think that the board has a whole lot of power in its enforcement discretion and how it's choosing to look at these cases and who it's having look at these cases in early critical stages, and that could circumvent a lot of these statutory messes that we might get ourselves into. So word of caution just early on. Thank you.
Thank you. Moderator, would you open it up to the public online, please?
Thank you. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So just for a little further discussion in history, originally that was the suggestion that Dr. Miller had made was something that we considered in our first meeting, which was to give better guidance to the enforcement analyst that was receiving the case, so that it was more clear, or at least could help them to sort of prioritize differently. But I think there was some concern that that was too maybe prescriptive for them, and it was going against the statute. And then there was another consideration of potentially having the consultants that are deciding whether it needs to go to a subject matter expert or not add to that list of things that they're deciding as to whether it fits the priority one or not. So I think that, to me, that was also on the table, but I think there were some reasons. Jessica?
Yeah, so a few things to clarify in 4875.1A. It's specific about the allegations that come in and how complaints are received. That's done by our technicians. Those are office technicians who are reviewing them to decide the priority. And so they're assigned at the time, and so they look at this list, and it's not just if they're alleging negligence or incompetence, because that continues on. That involves a death or serious bodily injury to the animal patient, but such that it represents a danger to the public. So I think that the part that we're struggling with is the serious bodily injury part. The death is objective. It's either died or not. And then that immediate danger, I think, would help the staff be able to determine that, okay, that's a priority one. And then the defining the subjective part right now, because serious bodily injury is subjective. And I agree with Ms. Lutz's comments that these complainants are making it, they put in a lot of things where they are alleging, because again, this is based on their allegations, that it is a danger to the public. And so I think putting these clarifications in here, knowing that it's about the allegations, not what actually occurred, would be helpful for that. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because the current statute says allegations, it's the allegations from the consumer. So whether or not that turns out to be the case, which we see the statistics is more than often than not, that's not the case, but it's what the allegations are.
Tara?
For your consideration, what about inserting unlicensed practice under paragraph 3? So right now it's 1, negligence or incompetence involving the practice on the animal. 2 is cruelty to animals. It's that direct action to the animal. And so perhaps insert unlicensed practice there, because that, again, is direct practice on animals. And if you're not licensed and you have no idea what you're doing when you're administering medications and prescribing supplements or whatever it is, prescribing treatment to the animal and diagnosing various conditions, you know, that's clearly more of a public danger than current 3, which is serious. But it starts to get more about the practitioner and less about the practice on the animal. So perhaps unlicensed practice would be appropriate to insert under current 3 and then move the rest of the list down.
I like that. Okay, so let me look at the WebEx. I'm not seeing any of our members with the hands up. Okay, well, it doesn't seem like there's more discussion. Do we have a motion? Or if you feel like this needs more work, that's an option too. Dr. Sullivan?
I guess I don't see the exact wording. Wouldn't that be what we'd be voting on?
It is action.
Okay.
I guess it's not a very good motion. I'm looking at it now. This is why you should write all of the memos, Dr. Sullivan. The action requested on page 5.
Well, oh, so it's just unlicensed practice.
That's the only thing that has been changed for this during the discussion, is that the NDC would like to add unlicensed practice, and then you would go to the motion, the action requested.
I see Dr. Sequoia has her hand up. Moderator, would you, or Dr. Sequoia, I guess the moderator doesn't have to do anything.
Yeah, I'd like to say that given the rationale of putting unlicensed practice as number 3, I think 4 should be bumped down to the list and everything else should be moved up, because the others are actually talking about the practitioner performing veterinary services on the animal, whereas the conviction or convictions for a criminal charge or charges, that's not directly involving providing animals with veterinary services. So I think it's serious, but it should go to the end of the list, is my feeling. Thank you.
So if I'm understanding you, Dr. Sequoia, you want to move number 4 to the bottom of the list and move everything else up?
Correct.
Kathy?
Sorry about that. And I realize now that we're in order here, I just want to put this out here. It seems to me unlicensed practices is very bad, of course. But shouldn't, let me see here, drug, alcohol abuse, or involving the death or serious injury of an animal, or even all the rest of them, it seems like unlicensed practice should be a little bit lower down, in my opinion, than some of these where, obviously that can involve all those other things as well, but there's not a licensee involved. So I just wanted to put that out there.
So Tara, if I could ask, so you recommended putting it in that spot. Is there a reason? Yeah, it was, because I was also looking at 3, and I think it was actually paragraph 3 that Dr. Sequoia was recommending move to the end of the list, because this is, a criminal conviction, and there's no mention of the practice on the animal. That's a, personal conviction that's related to the practice of veterinary medicine, but it's not specifically causing direct harm to animals like 4 is, practicing veterinary medicine while under the influence. And then 5, more it's drug abuse resulting in animal harm. So perhaps we could, reorganize some of these so that it's more clear that it's the practice on the animals violations or allegations should be further up the list. So 3 could go down at the end, and potentially 6, because that's self-prescribing, not involving the practice. Now, as far as inserting unlicensed practice, maybe that could go further down once we remove the self-violations and get those practice violations further up the list. Maybe unlicensed practice could come at the end of the practice violations or allegations, and then list the criminal conviction substantially related to the practice and self-prescribing, have those at the very bottom.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I like your first idea of putting unlicensed practice 3. I had a case where the patient was getting anesthetic-free teeth cleaning and came in with a dislocated hip. I had another one which came in where the client was consistently going for this care, and over the period of 6-7 months, they actually scaled the carnasal tooth down to the root. So I think unlicensed activity is a high priority because, first of all, clients are very hesitant to report it because they're getting a favor done. And the cases that I have seen are atrocious. And the only reason the client made a complaint was that it ended up being so bad. So I think it should have a high priority.
Okay. So we still don't have a motion. So it may be that we need to, well, we don't have it, I don't think we have the numbers properly. Like, I think we talked about it being at 3. We've talked about moving some other things around. My thoughts are perhaps there should be one more meeting to discuss this and then have this better hashed out and then bring it back to the MDC in January, or, I mean...
It would be,
Dr. Sullivan?
I actually like it when it's up at number 3 and the other changes that are proposed. I would.
Okay, let's do that then. So we'll keep it at number 3, and then Ms. Pulowski?
I will make a motion that we recommend to the board the submission of the legislative proposal to amend VPC section 4875.1 regarding complaint prioritization with the changes to add unlicensed practice to number 3 and modify the other, I'm getting down there, sorry, gotta go down there. The other numbers to make them where they are prioritizing patient care. Is that?
I think it needs to be more specific.
Okay, so I think the concept right now is
For patient health and safety.
inserting new unlicensed practice as new paragraph 3, moving current paragraph 3 down to be new paragraph 9.
Okay.
Maintaining existing 4 and 5, and moving paragraph 6, which is self-prescribing dangerous drugs but not involving the direct practice, moving that to be new paragraph 10. Then maintaining 7, which is repeated acts of excessive prescribing without a VCPR, and maintaining existing 8, which is extreme departures from minimum sanitary conditions, such that there is a threat to an animal patient. So it's,
Tara, there would only be 9 total because we're only adding 1. So, because you said to make one change, so we're adding
Like,
just
that's where I
one?
got lost. I was like,
oh, okay.
So it'd
9.
be,
So 1, 2, 3 is new unlicensed practice. Current 3 becomes,
number 8.
6.
Yeah, that one becomes 8.
Because then 4 moves up to 3.
Yeah.
Or
All
4
right,
is
so
there.
existing 3 becomes new 8.
Self-prescribing, existing 6 becomes new 9.
Yes, and existing 6 becomes new 9.
Okay.
Wait.
I think self-prescribing of dangerous drugs should be higher.
I thought they had it. That's what I was looking at.
I don't think it should be 9.
Where?
So perhaps we just move number 3 to the end.
To the end.
And
Keep
make that 9 and keep everything else the way it is. I think that works best.
Thank you, Jeff. Sorry. The only one I have. Are we good with 6, the where it is? I know you have to go. Are we good? Are we good with this? And we're good with my motion to accept the renumbering?
And it sounded like Dr. Sequoia also seconded. Dr. Sequoia, do you agree with the changes that you see on the screen?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay, great. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion from the group here? I'm not seeing any, and I don't see any hands up there. Any more discussion in the room, or public comment, rather, in the room?
All right, Grant Miller, CVMA. So in looking at on page 7 and 8, these pie charts that are there, are these pie charts meant to represent the categories that are listed in 4875.1 to fulfill the requirement in section C that the board annually report and make publicly available the number of disciplinary actions taken? Is that what these pie charts are?
So I'm sorry, were you reading from the?
Yes, so the statute requires the board to tell the public how many category 1s did you have this year, how many category 2s, how many category 3s. Is that what these pie charts are?
No, the pie charts are the allegations that they come in to the board. The part that you read are the disciplinary outcomes specific to it, so those are not the same.
Okay, great. So second comment, in relation to the modified language that was previously there where we added the "and" to animal health and safety. Can that go back up again? Who has that, Jeff? So the way that I read this, when you see the word "and" there, it means that it's inclusive. So not only do you have to be an immediate danger to the animal, but you also have to be a threat to animal health and safety. And it's hard to figure out if, without proper punctuation, the "or" and the "and," it can be read multiple different ways. Do you see that? It's my left-handedness coming in. So, okay, so you're an immediate danger to an animal patient or the public. Yes?
Yeah.
But then, would you be an immediate danger to the public and to animal health and safety, or to the patient and to animal health and safety? Do we even need animal health and safety?
I'm not, I think this was written, Tara, do you know, Jessica?
Yeah, it was just written to mirror what's in 8, because in 8 it has that order, so it was mirrored. But so if you want to make the change, I would just recommend making a change in both the first one and in 8.
Okay. Can I move on to my final comment?
Yes, please.
I'd like to point out in B that the board may prioritize cases involving an allegation of conduct that is not in A. You have discretion to go after unlicensed activity. What this is saying is from my understanding, from our understanding of this conversation years ago, is that the board has a pot of money, and they have a budget to use to enforce, to investigate, to enforce, to do what the board does. And the highest priority of that money has to be 1, then 2, then 3, so on and so on and so on. If there's money left over, or there's something else you think you can do outside of your budget, you can encompass that in B. And so, am I wrong with that?
No, keep going.
Okay, and so you might want to consider, as much as the CVMA is very much against unlicensed activity, we have an entire Stop Illegal Practice campaign. You all know the personal sacrifices I have made to stop illegal practice. you might want to
3 minutes are
consider
up.
the fact that you already have statutory authority in B to pursue unlicensed activity to the degree that the board is able. And if you would like this legislation to move successfully and smoothly, keeping unlicensed practice out of a line item might improve your chances. Thank you.
Jessica?
Yeah, so to clarify, we absolutely do enforce against unlicensed practice. It just can't be in a higher priority than 1 through 8. So I just wanted to clarify, and you can see on our website, we do take action against unlicensed practice, but it's just that we cannot prioritize it more than 1 through 8.
Tara?
So in effect, the board could prioritize unlicensed practice as imaginary 9.
Right.
So, you've got 1 through 8, and then unlicensed practice falls after that. So the question is, does unlicensed practice need to be in the 1 through 8 high priority list? Or could it remain potentially as imaginary number 9?
Well, I think when we talked about this, we felt like it was it should be a high priority. It should be prioritized higher. Jessica?
Yeah, and I just wanted to also point out, in the CPEI guidelines for things that are high priority, they do have unlicensed practice in category 2. So they do also think that it's a very high priority. But the benefit to leaving it out and just putting it as, it's not necessarily imaginary 9 because it really depends on the type of case, because you can get unlicensed practice where maybe they're just using the term or titles that represents unlicensed practice and not actually practicing unlicensed practice. So anything that involves unlicensed practice is prioritized, just not in 1 through 8. But if you want to, it's clear that DCA thinks unlicensed practice is a high priority. It's just up to the board to decide, is it a high priority in 1 through 8, or are we good with prioritizing it after that?
Okay, so we have a motion on the table and we have a second. We could just go ahead and we'll open it up, I guess, to the public comments online. Did I do that already? I'm sorry. Okay, moderator, can you open it up to the public comments online, please?
Thank you. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public wants to comment, you can type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen or simply raise your hand. We do have a 3-minute limit. I gave you a 50-second warning, and I do see that Anita Levy-Hudson has her hand up. So Anita, you should be able to unmute yourself. All right, I'll try that again. Anita, if you see a prompt to unmute yourself, go ahead and click on it. There you go. Anita, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking allowing me to have a moment to speak. I appreciate that. And listening to the discussion about the complaint process, it's so involved. And I just have a question because I thought I understood, but I'm just a little uncertain now. When we're talking about unlicensed activity, we've been talking a lot in the world of veterinarians, but this also, my question is, does this also encompass veterinary technicians? And is then section B the section where someone who wanted to report title protection violations, is that where that would fall? Since it's not specifically in there, and I just want to clarify for myself.
And this is the moderator. I don't see any further requests for comment.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Kathy?
Okay. I was just going to, and I'm not seeking to make a change in this motion, but I do understand and respect Dr. Miller's remarks on the unlicensed activity, knowing sort of the mindset of the legislature and some in the public domain these days. But I do think it's our job to try and put this in and advocate for it. And if it gets modified, it gets modified. But I understand where he's coming from.
Okay, I think we should just take a vote, and then we can go from there. Thank you.
I just want to clarify the motion for the record. The motion is to recommend to the board submission of a legislative proposal to amend Business and Professions Code Section 4875.1 regarding complaint prioritization as revised at this meeting to insert unlicensed practice as new paragraph 3 of subdivision A and move current paragraph 3 to new paragraph 9.
All right. Mr. Felt?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
I am going to vote for no because I think it needs to be looked at more deeply because of unintended consequences that we have run into previously with opening up the statute.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Bradbury?
I'm going to say no.
Dr. Lazarchuk?
No, I'd like to see this again.
Was that a no?
Yes, that was a no.
Ms. Pulowski?
No.
Dr. Sequoia?
No, I want to revisit it.
Ms. Ustry?
No.
Dr. Waterhouse?
No.
Motion dies.
Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll revisit this and bring it back in January. Yeah, and I'm sorry, the blood bank, Dr. Waterhouse? Dr. Waterhouse will be presenting the FAQs. She didn't know that she was going to be presenting this, but I unfortunately have a dental issue that I have to go deal with. I apologize to everyone, but I have to leave, so thank you all for your consideration of the last thing. I think it does need more work, and thank you.
Thank you for all your work on our committee. So with that, we will move on to agenda item 7, update and discussion regarding the animal blood bank frequently asked questions. And
I'll take it.
Jessica will take this on behalf of Drs. Bradbury and Waterhouse.
Okay, so we're not asking for any motion of approval because we don't need to do that for frequently asked questions for things that we put on our website. But we do, just to kind of backtrack, we have been working very closely with CDFA on animal blood banking. They receive a lot of questions when they give presentations. We receive a lot of questions, and so the Animal Blood Bank Committee decided to put together a list of frequently asked questions. This is an evolving document. As questions come in, we'll add proposed responses. This was done in conjunction with CDFA as well. So they provided us a list of their common questions and proposed responses, and then we worked on those responses together. So the goal for the Animal Blood Bank Subcommittee is really just to solicit some input from the MDC members, from the stakeholders. If you have additional questions you like added, if you think that the answers are maybe confusing, or if we can change any of the questions, please let us know and provide that feedback. But again, we're not asking for an approval because this document is such an evolving document. We don't want to have to wait for every single board meeting to change it. But we would just like input from the committee if you have any.
Yeah, I thought that the difficult part to answer were those situations where there were multiple practices under one ownership, and I thought that was explained very clearly.
All right.
Yeah, and you said Thank you. I agree with Dr. Sullivan. I thought they were explained very well. This is a living document that as things come up, we may add or amendment.
In fact, as soon as we posted it, we got another question from CDFA. So it's going to continue to grow, and we'll just keep adding to it, but we want to make sure that if anyone does have input, they feel free to provide that input so we can keep improving it.
Thank you. And I thought it was good that it posted, here are the requirements, here's some resources, blah, blah, blah. So it was well done.
Is there any public comment on the FAQs for blood banking in the room? Don't see any here. Moderator, can we please open this for public comment?
Thank you. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or you may simply raise your hand. We're displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, that takes us to agenda item number 8, election of our 2024 committee officers. Never happening.
Are we going for president first? Or chair, I should say. Chair. I nominate Dr. Sullivan for chair.
I second that.
Dr. Sullivan, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Is there any discussion? Nope. Discussion from the public? Moderator, there aren't any in the room. Can we open up to public comment?
Thank you so much. I've opened up. Thank you. I've opened up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public online would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Are there any other nominations?
All right. So this is to appoint Dr. Sullivan as MDC chair. Ms. Schafelt?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Abstain.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury is absent. Dr. Lazarchuk?
Yes.
Ms. Pulowski?
Yes.
Dr. Sequoia?
Yes.
Ms. Usry?
Yes.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations. Kathy?
I'd like to nominate, excuse me, Marie Usry for vice chair.
I'll second that.
Ms. Usry, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Is there any discussion on the nomination? Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Can we open up to the public, please, in the room? No public comment in the room. Moderator, can we open up to public comment online?
Thank you. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Ms. Schafelt?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury? She's absent. Dr. Lazarchuk? Dr. Lazarchuk?
Oh, yes.
Ms. Pulowski?
Yes.
Dr. Sequoia?
Yes.
Ms. Esri?
Abstain.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations.
I just wanted to put on record to thank Ms. Schufelt for a fabulous year as the MDC chair, watching you as from the board and giving the 12-hour-long presentations before the board of the very complicated and intense agenda that the MDC always does. You've done a great job. Thank you very much.
Okay, then that will take us to our agenda item number 9, future agenda items and meeting dates.
So the next MDC meeting is scheduled for January 16th, 2024. We do have the items that were tabled for January that's going to come back. So we have the medical records and the complaint prioritization will come back into MDC. We also have updates from the inspection mobile app. But after the strategic planning session for the board on Friday, we will likely have another list of items for the MDC to tackle. So that's why you don't have a printed list of tasks yet, because it's coming after Friday. So, but if there is any additional items that the committee would like to add, please let us know. No?
Any public comment on future agenda items or meeting dates in the room? Seeing none, can we open that up for public comment online, please?
Thank you. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right. We are adjourned at 2:01 p.m. Thank you all.